Welcome into a new and, well, different edition of Celtics Beat. Kaufman back here with you for a very rare Friday release because, as we know, there's a lot going on.
After meeting with team owners, I have decided that until we can guarantee the health and safety of our NBA players, there will be no more basketball this season.
That, of course, is not Commissioner Adam Silver. That's a clip from the movie Space Jam, released back in 1996. This right here is Silver on TNT Thursday night.
We wanted to give direction to our players and teams and to our fans that this is going to be roughly at least a month. But then the question becomes, is there a protocol with or without fans in which we can resume play?
So, Space Jam called it. Simpsons no longer get to predict everything. But, jokes aside, I mean, we need a little levity in this moment. This is very serious. Most of us are worried, scared. Some are even sick or symptomatic in the wake of the coronavirus outbreak. First and foremost, I hope you are staying safe out there, hygienic, just keeping your distance from others, washing your hands constantly, everything that all of the medical professionals and scientists and everybody else have talked about. Just stay home, stay away from others. It's probably the safest thing to do right now. Give yourself a self-quarantine, a couple-week lockdown. But I am thrilled to be joined by Bleacher Report senior NBA writer Howard Beck, who I've chatted with a number of times in the past doing national radio shows, and great to have Howard on this show for the first time here. And before we get into just everything that has been going on and continues to go on, a lot of it's going to be speculation on our part, I know. How are you doing? How you feeling?
I'm fine, thanks, Adam. I feel fine. It's more at this point, I think, a kind of a mental thing than a physical thing for a lot of us. I mean, I'm fortunate enough, as far as I know, not to be ill. And though I was in contact or serial contact with folks within the last week, which we can talk about later. But no, I mean, I'm good. My family's good. And so far, my daughter's school's still open. Things are normal-ish, but, Bleacher Report's New York offices and San Francisco, I'm sure, too, are open, but everybody's been encouraged to work from home if you can. I work from home a lot anyway, so that's what I'm doing. I taped a podcast yesterday with Bucks owner Mark Lazary, where we could have gotten together. We're both in New York, but we decided, out of abundance of caution and convenience, to do it by phone. And so, look, I'm adjusting like everybody else. I'm adjusting to this new reality of no NBA games like everyone else. I'm, like other NBA journalists, trying to figure out what the best way to still cover all these things, whether by podcast or by stories, because there's just not, one, it's all the great unknown. We have no idea what's coming next, both for the NBA, for the world of sports, and for society at large. We don't know where this pandemic is going or how much further it may reach. So I when I say more mental than physical right now, yeah, all right, I'm healthy, but like everybody else, I feel like I'm in a little bit of a daze just trying to get my head around this, because none of us have ever experienced anything quite like this in our lifetimes.
No, nothing remotely, and it just, more and more news continues to happen. You have all the major leagues that have shut down either with cancellations, like Major League Baseball canceling the rest of spring training and pushing back opening day at least a couple of weeks. You have, obviously, this morning, just before we chatted, the Masters, which was supposed to be a month from now. That tournament has been postponed, all of the major leagues suspending operations for really what is, not unlike the NBA, an indefinite period of time. And really, it's only the NFL that's business as usual right now because there are no games to be played. XFL shut down and probably for the whole year. NFL free agency will begin on time. But as it's central to the NBA, several teams, Celtics included, because they faced the Utah Jazz twice in the last couple of weeks, and those two players, Rudy Gobert first and then Donovan Mitchell, his teammate, they're the only two that we know about as of this moment that have been infected with coronavirus, have tested positive, and the C's, again, having matched up with them twice, once in Boston just a week ago. C's are home, back from Milwaukee. They're self-quarantining through the weekend as players are tested. The league has asked players, stay healthy, stay in shape, be prepared, but at the same time, be home as much as possible. Don't travel outside your market. No group workouts, no practices. Talk to your team physicians and trainers every single day. And from there, like you said, global health crisis. Who knows? So let's start with, where you began, the fact that you just talked to the Bucks owner. What's the mentality among ownership, some of the owners around the league, especially a team like Milwaukee, flirting with an historic season? What's the mentality right now?
Yeah, it's funny because in the bigger picture here, obviously, there are much more important things to be concerned about than who might win the NBA championship if and when there's a season again. But I said at one point, after we'd spent a good 20 minutes talking about just the crisis itself, I said, listen, this is the best season in Bucks history, potentially. and real championship hopes and a lot on the line, and it's exciting. And to just have it just be kind of put on pause or possibly taken away from you. I mean, that like how that like not the most important thing in the grand scheme of things, but isn't that kind of rough? And yeah, I mean, Lasry kind of said, yeah, listen, this is kind of emotionally a little bit wrenching. I can't remember what words he used, but no doubt for the Bucks, and I'm sure for the Lakers too. And I mean, think about this again. Perspective needed. There are much more important things going on in the world with regard to this pandemic, but we operate in the world of sports, so we have to allow for the fact that, yes, there are things like if you are the Lakers or if you're LeBron James, who, as we say, you're 17, age 35, legally required to divulge that every time. LeBron doesn't have that many more years potentially to do this. So what if the season's wiped out? What if, they have a legitimate shot at the title? Mm-hmm. Like the idea that he might get denied that Giannis may get denied the chance to win his first championship, that the Bucks have at least, some plausible concerns about whether Giannis will stay or go, and winning a championship could certainly help that. I mean, these are NBA issues. These are the things we talk about during good times and bad. And so I don't want to over apologize for talking about something that feels very trivial in the moment, but these are the real issues for these teams, for these franchises, for these players, for their careers. And yeah, it's all just the great unknown right now. I think team owners, I think people, it seems to me that the league has a very healthy outlook on this right now, which is, yeah, it blows to have to be in this position, but they all understand exactly where we are and what we had and what needed to be done. Like when I say healthy position, I mean like nobody was trying to argue against this by the time Rudy Gobert comes down with it. It was Adam Silver was empowered to make the move that he did and suspend the season indefinitely. He did that pretty swiftly. Yes, there was a lot more kind of, I think, deliberating before Rudy Gobert's positive test about can we just play with no fans and all this and these other half measures. And, the Warriors had to do it because San Francisco ordered no large gatherings. Washington, D.C. had just an advisory that we would prefer that you not have large gatherings. And so the Wizards were still going to play with fans as of Wednesday afternoon, as of just hours before we got the news about Rudy Gobert. And so the league was, I think, to an extent, like everyone was, struggling with what the proportional or proper response was. And then the decision was foisted on them. And I'm not, it's funny because the league, NBA and Adam Silver getting a lot of praise for the decision. Yes, sure, they made the right decision. I also don't think they had a choice. The second Rudy Gobert came down with coronavirus and Donovan Mitchell too, the second those tests were positive, there was no choice to be made. They had to do this. So kudos to the NBA for acting swiftly, but this wasn't some proactive response. This was reactive. It was the only thing they could do.
Well, and obviously Gobert really, not in the world, but in the case of the NBA, kind of being viewed as patient zero. And his, you see the clip from just Monday when he's touching all the reporters' microphones and recorders and really kind of mocking the situation. In some people's eyes, in other people's, it was almost I saw some jazz beat writers saying it felt like he was trying to unite with us in the fact that we had to keep our physical distance. He was trying to bring himself closer to us. You can defend it or attack it any way you want to, and people look at it from kind of both sides of the aisle. But he was in admitting on his own through a social media post, he was reckless. He was careless in kind of how he handled himself and other people's belongings and all of that. And unintentionally, he didn't know he was infected, but he spread the virus around, then goes to Mitchell, and who knows where it goes from there. And we'll see. The whole thing is obviously totally unpredictable, but I don't know. Are you of the mindset that it's just hard to even measure his level of stupidity in that situation, or do you kind of overlook it because he was just naive?
I feel like people maybe are going a little bit, maybe a lot even too far with the Rudy Gobert reactions. Was it, a little cavalier, maybe even reckless, or just immature to grab all the microphones, do all that stuff? Yeah, sure. I mean, it's not what you want to see from a person in the public eye who should be, you hope, setting an example, as a role model, all that stuff. And just even for his own sake, treat this matter with the seriousness that it deserves. On the other hand, I think he was just trying to be lighthearted and lighten the mood. And that's how I think the Jazz media at the time kind of interpreted it. I don't think anybody was overly alarmed about it. And besides, we don't know where Rudy Gobert contracted the coronavirus from. We don't know if he gave it to Donovan Mitchell or Donovan Mitchell gave it to him, or if they both got it independently from other people that they came into contact with. And we certainly don't know if it had anything at all to do with those microphones, whether he got it from the microphone or was passing it to the microphone. We don't even know if those microphones have any, trace of the virus on them. So, people just need to calm down on this one. And what he did was inadvisable and a little silly and immature, but we don't know if it actually had any real-world effects. It may have absolutely nothing to do with the fact that he is now ill. And at a time like this, let's save our anger for, and our, stronger emotions for more important issues, like whether or not there are going to be enough tests for everybody, whether or not there's going to be enough hospital beds, and whether hospitals are going to be overwhelmed by people, needing care, and how that's going to have a domino effect on other people who need care that has nothing to do with the virus. All the other things that are going on. There's plenty of other issues for people to turn their attention to, other than Rudy Gobert grabbing microphones.
As we said, as you just acknowledged, as we all know, common sense, health is paramount. But because obviously we're doing what we do, and it's sports, and we already missed the NBA, we want to know if and when it's going to come back, and all of that is just conjecture. It's speculation at this point. It's naturally something that Adam Silver was asked about in his interview on TNT. Is it possible the season will not resume?
Of course it's possible. I just don't know more at this point. There's another factor that may go to the seasonality of this virus. Again, I've talked to a lot of experts. It's a little clear. Some have a theory that it's just as with the common flu, as the weather changes, we may see it begin to peter out a little bit. We don't know. So, at this point, we're just waiting.
Mavericks owner Mark Cuban also offered this just the other night on a timeline.
We have a lot of flexibility because there's nothing that happens after June 12th when we typically end our season. So it's more important for us to get it right.
And of course, Cuban's talking about his situation there in Dallas. There are plenty of NBA arenas around the country that do have commitments over the summer that could not maybe accommodate an NBA season that extends into late June, July, August. Who the heck knows? Right now, I'm not going to ask you what you believe, because none of us have a clue in terms of whether the season will come back. But let's just say it does, and it's clearly truncated, because I don't think any of us believes it's going to be before 4-6 weeks, whatever it would be. What should the league do the rest of the way? Should you start immediately with the playoffs? Should you try and wrap up a couple-week regular season and then have a shortened postseason, meaning, same number of rounds but shorter series, that type of thing? What do you believe should happen?
Well, it's hard to say should, partially because there's going to be so many different issues that factor into this, including the timing of when it's permissible or advisable to restart. And it's hard to say should also just because we have no idea as we sit here today where this thing is going, how much further it may spread, how much more serious it may get. But I would just say this in a broad outline, and I discussed this again with Mark Lazary on my podcast, and I talked to a couple just people around the league over the last couple of days about this. I feel like if we can take as a given, and we can't, but let's just assume for the sake of argument, that the 30-day window is the window, that at the end of that 30-day pause that Adam Silver announced, things have calmed down. The spread has slowed. Things are getting back to normal in daily life. Sports leagues are all ramping back up. People are returning to their offices and their schools, and we can just start the NBA again in mid-April. Well, that's when the playoffs normally start. I think the cleanest way to do this, as unfair as it seems to people, and these are extreme circumstances, so we shouldn't be talking about things like fairness and whatever. I think you just freeze the standings where they were the other night when games stopped, and that's it. That's the playoff field. Now, does that mean that Zion Williamson and the Pelicans are denied a chance to make a playoff run or a run at the 8th seed? Yeah, it does. Sorry. Does it mean that some of the seedings are frozen in a place that might be disadvantageous to some teams? Yeah, that's just how it goes sometimes. We are in completely uncharted territory, as a society and certainly as an NBA, for an NBA season. So you just do what you have to do. You don't quibble over the details. You don't, the lockout seasons had some built-in inequities. Every season has something that happens. And look, if you weren't good enough, I'm sorry, tough shit. You should have been better sooner. This is not a time to say, oh, it's unfair to the Trailblazers because they could have, it's unfair to sorry, this is just sports. This is what happens. Teams get hurt,
we've heard about the NBA. Sorry to cut you off. We've heard about, the league talk about the potential of experimenting with in-season tournaments and competition for the final playoff seeds, things like that obviously have not come to fruition at this point, but were reported long before the coronavirus outbreak. Is this an opportunity for Silver and ownership to step in and say, all right, let's have one of those tournaments to determine the last two seeds, with a little play-in?
I think that'd be fantastic. It's a great idea. I've heard other people suggest the same. Why not? Sure. Let's, maybe freeze the top 6 spots or something, or use the standings for the top 6 spots as they were on Wednesday night. And then, go 7th through 10th or wherever and have a play-in tournament like they've talked about. You can pull that off. I mean, if you can re-scramble the entire schedule, which they might want to do, you can certainly pull off the first ever NBA play-in tournament. That would be fine too. Look, I don't have any strong feelings on this. I just think the cleanest, easiest thing to do without impacting the rest of the calendar is to start the playoffs when they normally would in mid-April, if the world is back to normal, and then just move on from there. But if they decide instead, and it certainly sounds like from what Mark Cuban said, from what Adam Silver hinted at last night, from what Mark Lazary told me on my podcast, it certainly sounds like there has been a sincere discussion of recouping the games and still playing a full 82-game season and just pushing into the summer. Now, Adam Silver, in the clip you played, says, or excuse me, it was Cuban, I think, who said it, that, we can do that because we've got the whole summer to work with. Well, yeah, but now you're talking about, what do you do with the draft at the end of June if you're still playing games? What do you do with free agency that would normally begin July 1st? Mm-hmm. That's obviously pushed back. What do you do about summer league? Do you wipe it out? Do you just delay that? There are other things. Like it's not a completely clear runway. They do have other things on the calendar, not least of which, assuming it's still going, is the Olympics in Tokyo, right, which a bunch of NBA players are supposed to be involved in. And now if you can't do that in July because you're still playing in the playoffs, what, do you send all if everybody who's been eliminated from the playoffs is now your new player pool? Do you turn it over to a different group of players entirely? Can you switch it out to college players? I don't even know. I don't know how that works. But the Olympics are in mid-July. If you're playing the conference finals or finals in mid-July, that has implications. So to me, as I say, it's not my league and it's not my revenue that I'm about to lop off 20% of. But to me, the cleanest, easiest thing to do, assuming that the world's back to normal 30 days from now, is to just start the playoffs. And
not even just all those things that you mentioned, Howard, which are all very valid. The thing that jumps out to me, I had tweeted last night when Silver, I think, alluded to, the idea of there being basketball in August still, playing for a championship. And I said, nobody wants to see the NBA in August. And I got a whole bunch of pushback from fans saying, are you kidding me? Like, August sucks. I'd love to watch the NBA in August. But where I was coming from in saying that is, how can you start next season on time if you're playing for a championship in August? Doesn't it impact the next year and next year's calendar? If there has to be, to me, kind of a cutoff date. And I don't know what that date is. And obviously you bring up the draft and free agency, the Olympics, all these other factors that are as relevant for sure. But when you start to kind of bleed into next year, like, these guys need an off season.
Yes. And that's an important consideration too, and I'm glad you brought it up, because all of these things are going to require consent from and the agreement of the players' union for sure. Contracts only go through the end of June, and so first you have to change the date that everybody's contracts cover, and that's not that hard. But the union might have and probably should have concerns about guys playing, and it's not, of course, the whole league. It's only the last couple of teams. It's the conference finalists, the 4 teams that'll still be playing whatever in maybe July, and then 2 teams that are still playing in August in the finals. But the players who are on those teams certainly are going to want to have some sort of off season to recover, recoup, spend time with family, have a vacation perhaps, and to not have all that, back up too close to the starts of training camps. So what do you do? Does that now impact the 2020-2021 season? Where are you now delaying training camps? Are you going to shave games off of that schedule, or are you going to compress that schedule so that you can accommodate this full schedule? Again, to me, deciding to play a full 82 games after taking at least a month off feels to me like an overly ambitious and unnecessarily messy path. Start the playoffs on April 18th or whatever the date is, with the standings as they exist now, or have a play-in tournament for the 7th through 10th seeds or whatever. But to me, that, like I say, that's the simplest approach.
Well, I've only got you for a few more minutes here, but I do want to bring this back to the Celtics, because if in fact the season does resume, or in some shape, even if it's straight to playoffs like we talked about, what does this break, do you think, do for the Celtics? Because we're talking about third best team in the East standings-wise, 43-21, clinched a playoff spot last time out with that survival in Indiana on Tuesday, obviously trailing the Bucks and Raptors in the Eastern Conference, but they've also really struggled lately. Lost 4 out of 6. They're not healthy. Jaylen Brown is out currently. Kemba Walker has not been himself since really before the All-Star game, then played way too much in the All-Star game, and then sat out for a bunch and has looked terrible since he's come back. Gordon Hayward just starting to look good again, and then has to deal with another break. I mean, his time in Boston has just been a series of bad luck events. And, Jason Tatum, who has been ascending, and now there's a little bit of a layoff. Maybe that impacts him. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe he picks up where he left off. Just bigger picture. Is this, a silver lining for the Celtics, a mental and physical respite, or is it not good because obviously it's the same case for everybody else?
No, I mean, listen, everybody who is a contender, and I put the Celtics in that category, would say, listen, at full strength, we're confident we can take on anybody. And I think the Celtics at full strength absolutely have a shot to win the Eastern Conference. And they haven't been at full strength recently. So I don't, yes, Giannis is also going to get healthy, and he's got obviously a knee injury that was sustained within the last week, and he will benefit from a month off. But I think the Celtics would take that. If you said, do you want to face the Bucks with a gimpy Giannis, or maybe, well, if Giannis is out entirely, obviously it's different. But
sure.
If everybody's got some gimpy guys, you'd say, well, that's fine. I would rather just get my guys healthy. I'd rather go in with a healthy Jaylen Brown and a healthy Kemba Walker. So I think it helps the Celtics. I think it helps the Bucks. I think it helps the Lakers, because LeBron James, as people might have noted, is 35 and in year 17.
It's come up, yeah.
Yeah, occasionally. It probably helps Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. It's
well, how about the Celtics' first-round matchup would be against Philly? How about, getting Embiid and Simmons back?
Certainly. So there's one where if we freeze the standings and that you're going to play them, maybe you're thinking, you know what? I'd rather actually take my chances right now with no Embiid and Simmons.
Yeah, right.
With a couple of my guys banged up. But look, every team for the most part by this time of year has some guys banged up. There are obviously some more serious examples, more serious than others, as we've just gone over. When you're talking about a guy like Giannis or Kemba Walker or Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, that's a different level. But I think it will benefit everybody late in the season to suddenly get to rest and refresh. The flip side, of course, is teams are going to be rusty. Guys are going to be out of rhythm. Some guys might let themselves get out of shape, been known to happen. And as one of the doctors, one of the sports doctors who tweets a lot recently was noting, there could be more injury risk, because if guys are not training at the same level or haven't done anything basketball-wise, and then you're going to restart the season on potentially short notice, there's going to be some risk there too. So teams are going to have to be careful with the way they manage guys, and I'm sure they will. Today's NBA is a lot smarter about this stuff than it was 20 years ago. But yeah, that will be a fascinating wrinkle in all of this, is that suddenly when we do restart, we may have everybody 100% healthy across the league, which is almost never the case in April or May.
Well, I could keep going for quite a while with all this stuff, especially as it relates to the season, Tatum, and whether or not he can be the best player on a championship team, as soon as this year, and all of those good things. But I've kept you long enough. I really appreciate you hopping on, and it's a fascinating time, like we talked about, and maybe for an indefinite period of time, a little bit of a slow time as well. But hopefully, again, putting health first and that caveat, which goes without saying, from a sports perspective, I hope we're not done with the NBA this year, because I think a really interesting, fun season was unfolding and in some ways winding down, and I'd hate to see it come to an end like this.
Yeah, amen to all that. And, on top of it all, it would be nice just to see, this pandemic pass and to see, our world get back to health, and to see, people be able to return to their lives as normal, and to have to not worry so much about, who we're coming in contact with, who we may infect, and, can we live our normal day-to-day routines and all that. Like, it is a very strange time. And yes, I think we'll all be grateful not to just get the NBA back eventually, but just to get a sense of normalcy, period. So, we shall see.
I tell you, I hope handshakes become a thing again. I'd hate for the elbow bump to be the new norm.
It's not the worst thing in the world.
It feels a little weird to me.
In the best of times, we are probably all still spraying a lot of germs that we shouldn't be by handshaking.
It's
maybe
true.
This is just a time that all of society should reconsider the wisdom of the handshake.
Well, maybe. I just don't want us to all come out being Howie Mandel. You know what I mean?
Yeah, fair.
Howard Beck, Bleacher Report, thanks so much. I look forward to having you on again at some point down the road and talking about real basketball.
You got it. Thanks for having me.
Really great stuff from Howard. I'm glad he was able to hop on. And, like I said, we could have kept going for quite a while, because there are just so many facets to this. I kind of wondered going into our chat, boy, are we going to have enough things to talk about, or are we just going to be kind of repeating ourselves, going round and round, talking about the uncertainty of this? But I think there are a number of different areas to explore that really, we could have gone on for hours talking about all this stuff, but don't want to keep him too long. Want him to come back, right? On the subject of spreading germs and all that, as Howard and I were talking about at the end there, Jaylen Brown, we haven't heard from many Celtics really at all. I know a couple did some interviews while they were still out in Milwaukee, but none that we've been able to hear, just kind of print interviews. The C's Jaylen Brown, though, he went on Instagram Live, asked young people just stop joking about the virus, which I hope at this point, this was a few days ago, so I hope at this point we're at a point where everybody is taking this more seriously than they were even early in the week, but this is what he had to say.
Maybe you might not be affected by it, but somebody else that you probably know will, whether it's elderly, people who are sick already, people who are infected by other type of diseases, cancer patients, these people might not have the immune system to fight this virus off, so it might not be something that be concerned with you. But being aware and being sympathetic and considerate of people around you that this is urgent. The way they stop viruses is by shutting things down.
Jaylen's advice?
Washing your hands, spreading awareness as much as you can is great. Also being considerate, limiting your amount of contact with people, staying at home if it's possible, because you might be carrying it or know somebody who is, and the less people you come in contact with, the better.
So, sage words there, something that obviously everybody should keep top of mind right now. And just on the break, I didn't want to play this and take away from time with Howard, but just because it's not urgent or anything like that, but something worth including just on this break, if it's a break and not an end, as far as the NBA season is concerned this year. Cedric Maxwell, who was on the pod recently, a good friend of the show, part of the CLNS Media Network, all that, after the NBA announced its suspension of 30 days at this moment, he joined NBC Sports Boston and just, obviously said he hopes the season resumes, but this is how he feels players should view this situation.
I think we look at this right now like a school vacation where you're just away. It's a lot more serious than that, but if in context, it would be like being away for a month, be away for a week, and then starting back up. And as it, projected now, if the season, like it says, stopped now and you wanted to go back into the playoffs, the team that we'd be playing would be Philadelphia in the first round, and Philly would be coming to us. So I hope that they're going to do something like that. I think they will.
So we'll see. That's the hope. I know it's the hope for all of us. But again, Howard said it a bunch. I said it as well. Most importantly, take care of yourselves. Take care of your loved ones. Don't put anybody else in danger. Jaylen talked about it. It's not all about you or me or the next guy. Worry about the other person. My parents used to always say that when I was learning how to drive way back when. It was, think about the other guy, drive defensively. Well, in this case, unfortunately, we're kind of at a point in society at this moment with this outbreak and not knowing who has it and where it's spreading and when and how fast. You got to be defensive of the other guy and also take care of the other guy or girl. You know what I mean? Just stay away. Keep your social distance, as people keep talking about. Some people practice that even when nobody is sick. But just be smart, and this thing will hopefully be contained, and normalcy will ideally return not too far from now. But who knows? Total guessing game. So appreciate you joining us, and maybe this provided you at least a little bit of a break from everything that has been going on, because that's the unfortunate thing, right? Whenever there's a problem, however big or small, sports provide quite an escape. And right now, that just is not an option. So we have things like this. So thanks again to Howard, to my producer, Evan Valenti, to Nick, Larry, John, everybody at CLNS Media, of course, you can subscribe to the show. I don't know how frequently episodes will be released at this moment because there aren't new things to discuss necessarily, but if they are, obviously we'll keep pumping out regular shows, so stay tuned to that, and I'll give you updates on my Twitter as well, at Adam M. Kaufman. You can always find me there. We'll chat. I'm not going anywhere. So hopefully there's Geno again on the horizon. Want to get back in that garden real soon.